I'm Mason in 9th grade at Voorheesville Middle School, and I'm interviewing Tom Smith.
Okay, Mason, nice meeting you.
Great meeting you too. Okay, what is your name?
My name is Thomas J. Smith, Jr. They call me Tom, or TJ.
Okay. What rank were you?
I was a corporal. I was an acting sergeant when I was guarding Pearl City, where the aircraft carriers came into Pearl Harbor. So I was an acting sergeant. I never got the stripes, though. That was following Iwo Jima.
What is your age?
I'm 93. An old man.
Still going strong. What branch were you in?
Pardon?
What branch?
The Marine Corps, United States Marine Corps.
What kind of equipment did you carry?
What kind of equipment?
Yep.
Well, when I first went in, we went to Parris Island, and that's where they trained you. And when we first went in there, they gave us a rifle called an 03. It was a bolt-action rifle, and it had 5 shots in it. We had that for a couple days, and they came out with a new rifle called the M1. It had 8 shots, and the 3 shots meant a lot. They've been fighting in the Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and all those places, and when the new one came out, the Japs were really surprised because they got 3 extra shots. After that training, everybody got a 2-week vacation. I didn't get any vacation. As a matter of fact, for 3 years I was in the Marines. I never got except for weekends, I never got a vacation. And I griped about it, and they said I was going to New River in North Carolina as a Marine Advanced Training Program there. Well, they had Marine parachuters, believe it or not, running around. And they only used them one time because they weren't any good in the jungle. So they had the Marines there. We were training. When I griped about not getting my 2-week furlough, they told me I was going to be trained as a raider, Carlson's Raiders. They had Edison's Raiders, and then Mr. Carlson came along, and they were putting us together. So at New River, it was February when I got there. The ground was frozen, the water was frozen, and they did things like we ran through the jungle, and we came to a creek. Well, I had a vine. You had to grab the vine and swing across, but it never reached the other end. You had to drop in the cold water.
Really?
And then they took you to a swimming pool and set it on fire. And you had to dive in and swim the whole swimming pool. They taught you to go up and separate the fire, stick your nose up, go back down, and all kinds of things like that.
That's awesome.
Well, we were all set to go out to San Diego after being there for 2 to 3 months. And as we were leaving, they disbanded the Carlson's Raiders. And we were sent, what they were doing is putting together the 4th Marine Division. Yeah, okay. Anyway, we took the train from there to Camp Pendleton out in California, a little town of Oceanside. And we trained there for a couple months. And I had to carry that machine gun all around. Well, if you look at the war, we'll say this is the Pacific anyway. You had Australia, New Zealand, you had Tarawa, you had Guadalcanal, you had all those in the southern Pacific. But the Move Pacific, here's Pearl Harbor, Marshall Islands, Saipan, Tinian, Iwo Jima in Japan, and Okinawa was in there. So they started the campaign across the Middle Pacific. Well, we went straight, only outfit that ever left the United States and went right into combat. So we left San Diego, they took us straight to the Marshall Islands. The Marshall Islands is an atoll, 63 miles wide by 6 miles, 63 miles long, 6 miles wide. and that's where they had all the Japanese ships would come in to get refueled, get their ammunition, get everything they needed. Well, at the end of the island was Roy and Namur. One was an airfield, and the other was where all the storage was. Well, they dropped us off early in the morning, and I was one of the first ones off with my company commander. We went in about 50 yards, and they had all the barracks there. They had a barracks 3 or 4 stories high, maybe by 50 yards. And in that building was all the fuel, ammunition. Well, they sent me with my machine gun out to the right. The ocean was there, and 10 yards ahead, so we were supporting the troops. Well, they were putting a bomb on the door, and the thing blew up. There was nothing left but a hole in the ground. You could put a half a ship in it. 2 airplanes were blown out of the sky. People on a ship were killed, and it was a mess. They had 500 and some dead, and half of that was my company. Well, I got hit in the back with a piece of shrapnel, and we had to spend the night there. And the next morning, the general told us, let's get the hell off this island. So we went forward, but they had machine guns. And a Marine that was in there 4 years before I got there, he had a group, so I told him to take your group over to the left. I'm going to go around to the right. Well, we surrounded the machine gun. I had to kill 3 riflemen, and then we threw grenades in the hole and killed the machine gunners. Well, when I was doing that, I got hit in the leg again. So they sent me out to a hospital ship. And every operation, they have a big hospital ship. So I got out there, and they took x-rays and everything else, so they said my 2 vertebrae in the back were crushed. Well, I asked if I could go back. They said I'm going to Pearl Harbor. I said, well, I'd like to go back on my company. So they said, okay, but when you get back, you have to report in the hospital. Well, one of my best friends at that time was dead on the beach. Somebody had shot him 4 times in the back, so they were shooting all over the place. Well, once we got back, we got replacements, and we started training again. Well, they found out that I was trained with Carlson's Raiders. So they called me in and said, we're going to give you a scout group. And I had 4 other fellows. And I got 3 of them in my wallet. But anyway, we trained and we ran around and did a lot of getting together. And we got advanced training in hand fighting, how to knock you right here. You break open a vessel in there and you bleed to death, all that stuff. Guy by the name of Haddon is from Philadelphia, a real rich family. He traveled to China and Japan before the war. Well, after we got done training, we started out for Saipan. Well, we got to Saipan, and it's like 1,800 miles. But we landed, and Saipan had a mountain in the middle called Tapacho. It's about 1,600 feet tall, and around that mountain were little gullies and valleys and small mountains. Well, the 2nd Marine Division was on the left, and they had the flatland and swamps. My outfit couldn't get off the beach. They were dropping shells right on us. They went in about 1,500 yards, but we're here spending all day and night on the beach. Well, they grew a lot of sugar there and corn and stuff. Well, they were so accurate they were putting holes, like at the end of the table were 2 fellows from Brooklyn, Gravina and his buddy. They were always arguing about the Dodgers and Giants and stuff like that. Well, they had the sugar factory there, and a big, I guess it went up maybe 100, 150 feet. And there was a spotter up there, and he was directing the shells where to go. We took a beating, and the next day we found out about it, and we knocked that shell down. Well, we took off to the right and cut the bottom off. There's where the airfield was. Then we turned up, if this were the island, 2nd and the 4th Marine Division, nothing in the middle. We turned the bottom over to the 27th Army from New York. Then we turned up and went north. While we're going up there, we had that mountain in there. Well, we were shooting Japanese, and we go up there and find them. They weren't there. What they were doing is taking the Japanese and dropping in the water wells, all places, and dragging them back. So it was interesting. We were in the town of Garapan, and we cleaned it out, and then we turned north. Well, after 9 days, they inserted this 27th. And as a scout now, I'm going to say 80% of the time, we fought during the day, killing each other, kill or be killed. And at night, they sent me out with my group. So I would set up a post between the two lines. And for example, the regular Marine guy, Kotick, his group didn't want to go out with him. They gave him orders to go, but they didn't go. So I said, well, hell, I'll take my group out. So I set up right in the middle. But now it's nighttime, and they're trigger happy. So there's a 37 millimeter there and a cannon to shoot at the tanks. And I went over and told them, look, I've got to go out with my group tonight. I'm going to change the password a little. I'm going to say Schenectady and then the password. And they said, why are you asking for Schenectady? I said, Japanese can't say Schenectady. So that's what I did. I went out and set up here, and I could hear the Japs talking and drinking and the ladies giggling they were with. Came back in and sat in my foxhole and went to sleep. I woke up the next morning. My nose is itching. There are 20 dead Japs, 10 on each side of this road. And I was so tired, I didn't hear the fighting going on. But when they came in, they tried to say Schenectady, and they couldn't. So they shot him and killed him. But I did that for 80% of the battle. And then finally, when they put the 27th in, they called me in and said, we got to find the 27th Army. Now, the 27th Army, I'm going to say, take a look at this paper. This is a line here, and this is a line here. But instead of being even with us, they were half a mile behind us, the Army. So we came to this Mount Tapacho, and I started up, it was twilight, and the smell was awful, it was sickening. There was over 600 dead Japanese laying on the side of the island. You could see their skeletons and their guts and everything else. They'd been dragging them back playing psychological war with us. You know, where are the Japs? Well, they were there dead. I'll jump ahead now. There's a group called Coento. The last 15, 20, 30 years, they've been digging American bodies up, the Japanese people, and shipping the bodies back here. And some of them are up in Saratoga, some of them are in Arlington. Well, the kids are nice. Every time they come over here, I meet them up at the Saratoga Museum. And we have lunch and whatnot. Now I'll go back to where we were. So I got to the top of the mountain, and it was as hard as a rock. You couldn't dig a foxhole. So we slept at the top of the ground, and the next morning, about 5, we're getting bombed. I'm saying, what's going on? And then it dawned on me, that's our army. So I took my group off the other side of the mountain. I saw this lieutenant down at the bottom, and he said to me, where'd you come from? I said, the top of the mountain. What are you doing here? He said, that's the Army's objective today. I said, give me a piece of paper, I'll sign it over to you. He said, you're a smart, I'll use the word smart ass. And I laughed, I said, yeah, I guess I am. He said, well, how did we know you were up there? I said, how did I know you were down here? So we got to be friends. So I went back to meet the rest of the Army while he stayed there. Well, in the meantime, you got all these little ridges and valleys and things, and they got criticized pretty much because they couldn't keep up with the Marines. But I don't think it was their fault, because you had the mountain, you had all that stuff there. Well, anyway, we got that squared away, and About 2 days later, I'm out with my group, and coming back, there are 3 Marines out there, and a 4th one to the side. And I said to my group, spread out under those bushes as a machine gun. See if you can neutralize it. And they did. In the meantime, I ran out, picked one of the fellows up. He was wounded in the shoulder and the leg. 2 other guys came out, picked the others up. Well, about an hour later, a corpsman, they were the medical officers, came over to me and said, do you know who you picked up? I said, I don't know, but he was awful light. That was Colonel Carlson. He was assigned as a liaison officer for the 4th Marine Division. And he's an odd guy. He's tough as a rock, and we never got leave or anything like that when he was there. But anyway, that was one incident. But I did that all through Saipan, and got word the Japs were coming over from Tinian. We went out and set up a barricade on a bay. Anyway, when I got to the end of the island, I was the first one to get to the end. And inside the mountain, it's a couple 100 feet high. They're all caves. And the civilians were living in there, and the people. Well, they knew we had won the battle, so they started jumping off the cliff and throwing the babies out there. It was awful. Well, anyway, that ended that story. And we had 2 weeks off while we got replacements. And then we went to Tinian. We had about an area 50 yards wide and a good 100 yards from the land. And they couldn't get in because they had reefs and whatnot. So they had to drop us off, and as I say, went all the way up to my neck in water and had to walk in that way. Well, I went right in and set up an outpost. And then that night, while I was out there, I could hear a lot of rattling and stuff going on, so I reported it. And the next day, we went, it was 9 days we were there. So we went in pretty good the next day, but the following day, I was out in my post, and as I say, 80% of my time was out behind or in front of Jap lines. And I heard this noise. So I went back and reported that they're getting ready to have a banzai attack. Well, they had a big battle, and we put it down. And about 4 or 5 days later, I hear the same thing. I'm out there under a tree, and what the heck is that? And sure enough, they were getting ready for their last banzai attack. So I went back, I reported it, and I've been fighting all day. So I got my foxhole, and there were 5 of us in a hole, big hole. And I curled up in this corner and fell asleep. I woke up the next day, and there's a Jap there, there's a Jap there, there's a Jap there, there's one right over here. And why the hell didn't you guys wake me up? We shook you. We thought you were dead. But they had that big attack. It lasted a couple hours. But that was the last of the big battle. Now, we were still there 6 days, and each day I would go out. Well, we were near the end of the island, about a half mile back, and my battalion commander called me in, who's now Garrison. And he said, TJ, I want you to go out. It's daytime, and I know you never go out daytime, and see what's at the end of the island. I don't think we have any opposition. So I said, okay. Well, we went out, and on the way over, I showed you a picture of that cliff. The bottom of the cliff, there's a cave inside. And didn't pay attention, didn't use my head because you should have cleaned it out. But we went beyond it, and on the way back, I said, geez, we got to check that hole out. Well, there's this immaculate dressed Japanese officer with field glasses. I brought up my rifle, I'm going to kill him. And he goes, no, no, no. He's going to give me the glasses. So I walked up to him and said, where'd you learn to speak English? United States. He was assigned to the ambassador in Washington and San Francisco. So anyway, I said, tell your men to come out of the cave. He said, they're not going to come out. They're going to die for the emperor. And I said, why don't you? He said, you think I'm crazy? I said, well, get on your stomach. If you move, you're dead. Well, it took us about a half hour to clean the cave out. We cleaned the cave out, and everybody got guns, whatever they wanted. But there are 2 suitcases, about like this. I picked them up, brought them out, showed them to him. He said, they're mine. I said, no, they're not. They're mine now. Are they triggered? He said, no. I opened them up, and it was all full of Japanese money. Now, he was in charge of all the airplanes from Japan all the way back to Pearl Harbor. That was how high he was. Well, anyway, I turned him into the battalion commander, went back to the front, and a runner came running up, said they want that money. So I took the money, took it back, and asked him what the story was. He said that he wants that money, and he thinks he can negotiate taking that money and shipping it to Switzerland or Spain. See, Spain wasn't involved in this too much. And then after the war, he and his family would go overseas. Well, anyway, I turned him in and I left. Now, that's the end of the story. The war has been over 70 years. But when I got back, I'm going to say for 30, 40 years, I've tried to find out what happened to that man. No one knows what happened to him. They say they shipped him to Pearl Harbor. They say he was killed. Nobody wants to talk about the story. And I've had this Cuento group that's been coming to the United States for 60, 70 years, digging up American bodies and shipping them back. And I got to be friendly with them. And when they went to Japan, they went to the little town where he was born. They went looking for it and it was disappeared. They took it and dismantled it. Gone completely. But anyway, no one wants to talk about it. And when I wrote this book, I sent it to my general, and he wrote me back and said, Tom, send a copy of that to Quantico, Virginia. Well, later on, I talked to him and I asked what the story is. He said, I can't talk about what happened to Vice Admiral. This is backing you up that your story is true. Well, anyway, I've had this guy, Wayne Madsen. He's got 4 or 5 letters in there he wrote me. He's looked into it, and he finally said to me, Tom, I think whoever got him higher up killed him and kept the money. And that's about the best we can do. Well, anyway, we went back to Hawaii, got reinforced, and we got ready for Iwo. Well, we sailed to Iwo, and on the way out there, we stopped at Saipan. And meantime, when I got back to our base, they promoted me to recreation officer. I was supposed to get the bars. I didn't get the bars. And mail clerk. I had my own tent. All the mail came to me. And then when the guys were killed, they took all their material and sent it to their families. That was the job I had. Well, anyway, we went to Iwo and stopped at Saipan. And my mother written me a letter, told me my uncle was on Saipan. Uncle Ed was in a destroyer during World War I. His son was in World War II, and he wants to join the Navy. Well, they wouldn't take him. He was too old. But he did join the Seabees, and he was there on Saipan. So there was another mail clerk who was higher than I was. He had a couple of bags, and I said, where are you going, Paul? He said, I got to take these in the post office. I said, geez, that's awful heavy. I better help you. So he and I went ashore, and I asked the post office guy, do you know Miller? Oh, yeah, Ed Miller. He's a mile down the road and a half mile to the left. Here's my keys. He gave me his keys. I got in his Jeep. Paul and I went down there. Uncle Ed was in bed with a bad back. Well, he saw me. It was like New Year's Eve. And he took me down to the cafeteria, and he started getting me fast. I don't have time for that. He says, my God, did you ever look at yourself? I said, what? Well, I weighed about 180 when I went in the service. I didn't think about it, but there was a scale there, and I got in the scale, and I weighed 120 pounds. I lost 60 pounds. Well, went back on the ship, and then we went to Saipan. Well, the thing that I always question is, and the general confirmed it, he could not confirm anything. He was told to keep his mouth shut. But he and I got to be friends. He was like my father to me in the service. So when he said to send this there, it was confirming that my story was true. And he called me in on the ship and said, we're going to be going ashore, Tom, TJ, and got good news and bad news for you. And I said, what's the good news? You're going to be with me on Saipan. What's the bad news? You should have been sent home ago. I was wounded 4 times. And at the end of the second time you're wounded, they were sending you home. You didn't have to go back to service. Well, anyway, we landed, and of course there's pictures in here showing you when you stepped in there, you sank that much in the sand. And the 2nd Marine Division was on the left, and it only took them 90 minutes to cut the island in half, and they worked on that mountain. We're stuck here on the beach, and we can't get off the beach. And they had these little Volkswagen cars. They had bombs like that. You could see them coming in the air and screeching, howling, and they just peppered the whole beach. And we stayed there that night, getting the hell beat out of us. Then the next day we got orders. This is an airfield. About this angle was the beach. And you had to get up there. And then this was the airfield. Well, there were over 400, think of this, 400 pillboxes. And the pillboxes were buried, were only this much thick out of the ground. And each one had an opening with a machine gun in it. Well, you had to get rid of those 400 machine guns. Well, a friend of mine, Sal Famulero, he was in Company G. His company commander, McCarthy, I knew him. He got a Congressional Medal of Honor for there. And, well, everybody that went through there should have got a Congressional Medal of Honor. Well, anyway, we got across the airfield the next day, and then it went up, as high as Mount Sorbacho almost. Now, this mountain called 382 had about 8 to 10 holes in it. They were caves. And the caves went in the mountain, and they dropped 4 floors down. They had a hospital that had 400 beds. They fed 22,000 Japanese underground.
At Iwo?
Yeah. And there was a letter they got it later in the war. Guy wrote to his wife in Japan, said, we're living underground. There are 22,000 of us. We got a hospital, we got a cafeteria, we got beds, we got everything we need. An atomic bomb won't get us out of here. But anyway, during the day, you saw very few Japanese people. Now at night, all those holes would come out with hundreds and hundreds of Japanese at night, and they would attack us. And, well, I was up there a number of times, but like my company commander sent me back and said, find out what's happening to Company E. And I left there, went back, couldn't find Company E. So I went off to the left, and sure enough, there's a fellow sitting there on the ground crying. I said to him, what are you crying about? He said, I'm Company E. And he cried, you're Company E? He's every man in my company is either dead or wounded. So he was alone. Well, I had to go back about a half a mile, report it. They gave me a group of people, about 60 of them, I guess it was. I took them back up, put them in the line. But at night, when they came out, you shot them. Now you're close enough, you don't have time to reach and get a clip and put them in there. Now you became using your rifle as a batting ram, your hand knife, and after a couple hours, they disappeared back again. Well, no one wanted to go down those holes. But that went on for about 5-6 days, and then finally we got them out of there. Well, we didn't get them all out. That tunnel was 6 miles long. And 10, 15 years later, there were half a dozen came out of there and surrendered. The Army had been working there, and they were picking up scraps and everything else, and they saw this paper. Well, one of them understood a little English and found out that the war had been over with so many years. Well, when it was done, it was 26 solid days of fighting. I landed with 259 men. I left there with 25. 6 of them were cooks. And the next 10 days, it was cleaning up. You know, going down the tunnel, taking what they could. And the skirmishers out in the woods, see, the island was funny. It was sand over here by the mountain, Tabacho. When you got to this end, it was solid granite. And, real granite. And went through all those things. and then got on the ship. And while we're back on Tinian, I was sitting in my foxhole. I'd been out all night, and there's a mountain in front of us. A Jeep pulled up behind me. I always enjoyed this. Who steps out but General Gates? He was commandant of the Marine Corps eventually. And he said, "How you doing, Marine?" I was, "Fine, sir. How you doing?" "Good." He's going to join you? "Sure." Patted me on the shoulder, sat down. He said, "We're going to see something new." And I said, "You notice the shells out there? 50 yards, 100 yards away, they're trying to reach us." I said, "You like your Jeep?" He turned and looked at his men, and he said to them, "What the hell are you doing here? Don't you have any brains? Get that Jeep out of here." Well, we sat and talked. He said, "They're going to drop a napalm bomb. And it's the first one that's going to be officially dropped on the enemy." And Queensbury up in New York was where they first started building that bomb. So we sat, he told me what was in it, how it was done. And shortly over, 2 Marine pilots came by, scared the hell out of both of us. They weren't over 100, 200 feet. And they went ahead and dropped the bomb across the whole field. Well, I'm going to say from 2 miles down to maybe another 3 miles, it was all on fire, like in hell.
What's the favorite part of that story?
The favorite part of the story? I came out alive. That's the biggest part of the story. And I'm going to tell you, anyone who says they weren't scared is crazy. My nature is different than yours. And every time something was over, I prayed. I'm not ashamed to say it. And I was scared all the time. But once you're in a battle, it's either kill you or you kill me. So at that moment, all that scaredness goes away. Now you're mad, and you're looking around to shoot somebody. You're willing to kill somebody. Fortunately, my nature was such that when it was over with, it was just like somebody turned a button. I never thought of the war. We were in training. I trained. That's all I thought about. And that's the way my life has always been. I do it, and it's over with. I never thought about the war until 1999. My dad always wanted to know about the war, and I turned him off. I always felt bad about that. That's why I wrote this book. I was in hierarchy and a lot of stuff in the church and Knights of Columbus, and I met the Pope a number of times. And I decided, I turned my dad off when he wanted to see my wounds and everything, so I wrote this book for him, 1999. Then I sent it first to General Garrison, and then I went to Boston. I was speaking at a convention up there, about 500 people, and when I got through, one of the guys called me over and said, "We couldn't interrupt you, but we got word your father died." So Dad never got to see this. So the next morning, of course, I went back to Schenectady and attended the funeral and whatnot. I always felt sad about that, because for another day or two, I might have given it to him. But other than that, my nature was, that's it, it's over with. I met a fella, Sal Famularo, who's in Walmart. I've been up here about 6, 7 years, never thought of the Marine Corps, and he's wearing a Marine cap. So I started needling him, and he said to me, "Smart ass, tell me about your experience." And I laughed. I said, "You're in Company G, I was in Company F." He said, "You got to be kidding." Well, he and I are like they're brothers now. We go to McDonald's twice a week for coffee. We've had a lot of publicity. We went to the Senate over here. They had Sal and I over there, and they gave us a Senate badge. And then they had there were 9 original Iwo Jima survivors here. We got down to 6, and now we're down to 5. One died 3 weeks ago. And we had the funeral up at Saratoga. But anyway, I needled him, and we got to be pretty good friends about it. And the owner of McDonald's, his manager, and the whole staff up there, we've been going up there 5 years. Well, they took a liking to us, so I don't mind saying it. We get free coffee anytime we go in, and they got pictures of the whole group, and then, of course, we buy what we want. But the sweepers go over and say hello to us, the cooks come out, They won't let us carry our food. They carry it for us. It's a nice bunch up there. So we got a little recognition. But we've met a lot of nice fellows. Like you got the Patriot Flight Group. They take veterans down to Washington. They spend all day there visiting all the monuments. Sal won't fly, so they got a car from one of the dealerships up here, painted Iwo Jima on it. We went down and spent a couple days. Mark knocks himself out helping all the veterans. He spends hours and hours driving people places, taking them, distributing stuff to them. They got John and Ron to do the flight thing. There's about 8 or 9 people that would, I would say, would adopt you. You're their son. Like, I'm part of their family. Mark's part of the family. There are about 8 or 9 of us that are that close. And if you need something, all you can do is call, and just like that, they'll help you out. Mason, I appreciate your being with me. It's nice. You're a nice fella. And
Awesome.
I wish you well. And study hard. And I don't know what you want to do with your life, but there's a lot out there. Good. Okay?
Thank you.